Okay, good morning, everybody. Let's get started. We had our quiz number 2 yesterday, and I would like to quickly go over the quiz to discuss some points. Today it will be less about how to solve the questions, but more about some expectations. So let me open quiz number 2. Let's have a look at the preview and start from the beginning. So we had 3 different questions in this quiz, and the first one was a little bit different from previous quizzes in this course or in the logistics management course. This time I presented you a case study from the Financial Times. As you remember, in our last on-campus session, we discussed three case studies from the Financial Times, 3 or 4 case studies. We had these group work exercises. You were supposed to prepare the articles at home, and then we had some group work sessions to summarize the articles and give short presentations. So everyone who participated in this exercise had a very good training and was exposed to these articles. Of course, the purpose of these articles was to give you a first understanding what is supply chain, what is a supply chain, and what is related to supply chain management. What are current challenges in supply chains in individual countries or in individual industries or all around the world. And of course, you were exposed to some of the concepts, but the point was not to memorize these articles, but to read challenging business English texts and extract meaningful information. This was one of the main activities. Now I presented you this text from the Financial Times. The Financial Times, of course, has a very good, but also an advanced level of English. This is not some Instagram webpage with some funny short words in English clipped together. This is the level of English that I would like you to understand, at least once you graduate from Geotech, though that you are great in communication in a different language. So when you prepare such an article at home, when you read English text at home, some students, this was my impression, the first thing they do, they copy the text and put it in some translator into Arabic. I think if this is your start to the procedure, then this is not a very good strategy. You don't really learn anything from this strategy. So in my opinion, the first thing you should do, if you are exposed to an English text, if it's from the newspaper or in an email, try to understand this English text as much as possible by just reading it yourself. Don't use some automated translations at this level. This will not improve your English skills. And the next thing is, of course, try to read difficult, challenging English texts every day. Spend 10-15 minutes every day reading sophisticated English texts. And once you are through the whole article, use your dictionary to look up some of the most challenging words to train your vocabulary, but do not look up every single word that you do not fully understand, because this will just interrupt your flow of reading. So the first thing is read through the whole article and try to extract as much information as you can. Usually it is not required to understand every single word in order to manage a good understanding of this word. after the quiz yesterday, 3 or 4 students came to my office. So the very good thing is that you came in my office hours to me. This was highly appreciated. This shows that you are well organized and that you can respect other people's time and that you know about the rules. So this was a very good impression that you made on me by coming up in the office hours and not immediately after the quiz. This was very nice. I liked it very much. And the discussion then was, the article is so long and we need so much time for reading it. Well, that's the whole point, to test your reading and understanding abilities of difficult business English texts. And some need a lot of time to understand it because their level is not as high as their fellow students, and other students are just much quicker in reading this. So just looking at the submission time, many students submitted before the time was over of the quiz. So therefore, I don't agree that it was too long. And I think most also know this of you. But still, we can discuss how quickly should you be able to read such a text. Though this article has 850 words, 850 words. And then we have a discipline called speed reading. So I just entered speed reading into Google, and this was one of the first websites that came up. Of course, there are books on this topic, and if you study skills, you also will be exposed to speed reading. So how quickly can you read a text, and how much do you understand from this text? This is the domain of speed reading. And here's a reading text with some dummy text to measure your reading speed. And here are some typical results discussed from this company. So according to this table, when you read a text on the screen and you read 100 words per minute, and you have a comprehension rate, you understand 50%, then your reader profile is called insufficient by this company. On the other hand, if on paper you're able to read 1,000 words per minute, WPM, words per minute, and you understand 85% of what you have read, you're considered an excellent reader. Of course, your understanding and reading speed does not only depend if it's presented on the screen or on paper. It also depends on the level of the text, how challenging this text is. Now you're reading in English, which is for almost every one of you a second language, and therefore automatically you will not be able to read as fast in English in your second language as you are in reading Arabic texts. On the other hand, you still can there's always room for improving your reading speed. So I told you the text has 850 words. So even a reader that reads on an insufficient level should be done after 8.5 minutes. So in less than 10 minutes, you should be through the text and able to score 50% of the questions in the right way. Though you can easily try to track yourself to see on which level you are, and maybe there is some room for more practice and improving, because reading skills, I mean, we are discussing here production logistics and transportation management, but for all the courses, for all your life, reading skills are a super important core competency. This is really one of the most important skills that you learn at a university. Reading sophisticated, challenging texts and understanding them. Now, if you are a good reader, you read the text in 300 words per minute. That means in less than 3 minutes, you are through the text. and you would score roughly 80% of the points. Now, even if you read it 2 times to increase your comprehension rate, to look up more of the things, you can be done as a very, very good reader in less than 10 minutes. So I suggest try to measure your reading speed, and if you are somehow between 100 and 200 words per minute, this is a sign that you should try to improve your reading skills. And how can you improve this? Try to read something every day. Don't sit down for 4 hours in a row to read a challenging text. Try to integrate reading in your everyday life. Read some books in English, does not need to be university books, just some English novels. Of course, it also helps if you train your listening skills. If you watch TV, try to watch it in English. This will be an everyday training that is easier to manage. It's more compatible with your everyday life, and you will be successful increasing your reading abilities. Okay, let's go back to the quiz. I will not go through these questions because this is something that you can do yourself. Of course, note every one of you got 10 questions, but not necessarily the same questions. So I had a pool of around 30 to 40 questions, and every student got 10 randomly chosen questions. So if you train with one of your fellow students, then they might have had different questions. Okay, let's go to the main exercise number 2, supply chain structures and costs. Let me highlight that this question was discussed in our tutorials. At least this type of question was discussed by Nama in an exercise with you, and she solved it in a very well manner. So all these things that were discussed here were very, very similar to the tutorial. So if you join the tutorial and train the material of the tutorials, you will always have a good chance that related questions, related ideas will be part of a quiz. Finally, we had the make or buy decision. We did not spend too much time on this decision in the quiz. We discussed it in, I think it was lecture number 8, the make or buy decision. But if you managed your teaching material from the logistics management course and from the beginning of this course, you quickly realize that these are the same techniques that we use for the break-even analysis. So in the break-even analysis, we use the same ideas that we use here to make our make or buy decision. And in that way, it was exactly, mathematically speaking, the same solution approach, but of course in a different problem setting. Okay, that's it about quiz number 2. We will have 2 more quizzes, and as I told you, I will count the best 3 out of your 4 quizzes. So there's always a chance to improve yourself. Let's go back to today's slides. Let's check if the recording is still working. Yes, this looks good. So what about advanced planning in supply chains? Today, the learning goals are the following 4. You should be able to explain the main concepts related to planning activities.
You are not sharing the screen.
Sorry?
You are not sharing the screen.
It's not sharing the slides?
No.
Now it's coming, right?
Yes.
Very good. So you should be able to, let me open this one. You should be able to understand the characteristics of advanced planning. So what is special about advanced planning? Why do we call it advanced planning and not just simply planning? You know some planning tasks in a supply chain. We will discuss many planning tasks, and the idea is to give you an overview of what needs to be done. We will not go into the details how to plan every individual task. This is also subject to future lectures, but you will know what planning tasks are there in the supply chain. And then one of the most important things for today's lecture, we will have a look at the so-called supply chain planning matrix, and you will be able to classify, to structure different planning tasks according to this planning matrix. And the today's contents of this lecture are based on a very nice textbook, or let's say a very challenging and advanced textbook, but it has a very nice overview of all kinds of topics related to supply chain management. And this is a book by Stadler, Klilger, and Meyer. And we will look at the chapter number 4 that was authored by Fleischmann, Meyer, and Wagner, which is called Supply Chain Management and Advanced Planning. So what is planning? What does it mean when we plan something? Well, we have in the supply chain many decisions to make. Some decisions are very simple. Which product do I want to manufacture today? Which customer do I want to call today? Which sales presentation do I give today? These are very simple, or let's say more simple tasks on a daily basis. On the other hand, we have all the decisions on, shall I build a new factory? Shall I onshore or offshore my manufacturing? Shall I make new contracts with certain suppliers? Shall I start producing a new product? For example, I'm an automotive manufacturer, and now I decide, should I go into the electric vehicle manufacturing domain? So we have a very broad spectrum of decisions to make, and there are hundreds of individual decisions, and we somehow need to coordinate these decisions. My salespeople should try to sell the products that I am having in inventory or that I'm very good in producing. They should not sell different products that I maybe plan to produce sometime in the future, but that are not available today. Though the importance of these decisions is of different importance, and the more important the decision, the more preparation we need. And simply speaking, we can call preparing a decision, we can call these activities as planning. So when we plan, we prepare our decision making. And there are two main things. On the first, we try to identify different alternatives. What are the possible decisions that I can do? What are the alternatives? So if you prepare for your midterm exams in the next week and you want to plan your time until then you have different alternatives how you can use your time. Yeah, you can spend a lot of time on the course that you will have your midterm exam. You can spend time on all the courses and a little bit more on the course you have your midterm exam coming near. You can spend the time on the courses where you have the most challenges, or you can spend your time on the courses that are the easiest for you, where you have already good results to improve yourself even more. So these are different alternatives for what we want to do in the future. And we have to evaluate these alternatives. We have to say what is a good alternative, what is a bad alternative, and then we can select some of these alternatives to make our decision. So we have alternatives and evaluation of decisions and selecting the decision. Here we distinguish between 5 phases of planning. The first step in planning is recognizing that we have a decision problem. Often decision problems are overlooked. We don't even realize that there is a decision problem. And once we recognize that there is a problem, we can analyze the problem to understand it better. In the second step, we define what do we want to accomplish, what do we want to achieve. So what is our objective when we make the decision? When you apply for a job after you graduate, what is your objective with this job? Do you want to have a high salary? Do you prefer to have more free time? So maybe you prefer to work part-time, or do you want to have a job that is that has maybe not such a great salary, but which creates opportunities for making a career where you learn a lot. So these might be different objectives when you search a job. In step number 3, we try to develop an understanding of what might happen in the future. How does the future look like? This can be very intuitive, very basic. It's just in my head. I have some idea about how the future looks like. The alternative to this is I can use market research, surveys, questionnaires, expert interviews. I can try to get some external data from the markets in order to make a very precise forecast. Keep always in mind, when we talked about forecasting, the first rule of making a forecast is that forecasts are typically always wrong. In step number 4, we try to come up with feasible alternatives, feasible activities. So what can be done? And usually we have several options, though we have to evaluate these activities. And we do this so that we can, in step number 5, select our best activity. In mathematical planning, we call these feasible activities solutions that define all the constraints of our optimization problem. And the best solution will be the one that has the best value for our defined objective function. In our logistics program at Geotech, you will be exposed to several methods. Among others, we will use simulation models and we will use optimization models. These are methods that can help you make quite complicated decisions, while the simulation model shows you more what might happen, how might things affect processes, and optimization models have an objective function, though they try to judge and evaluate the consequences of your action so that you can make an immediate decision. They propose a solution to you. The simulation models do not do this. They usually help to understand what's going on. When I introduced these slides, I told you about the different decisions that we make. Some are for what happens today, and others are for what happens in the next 5 years. So one criteria to distinguish between decisions is the planning horizon. The horizon, how long do we plan ahead in the future? And we usually have, or we distinguish between 3 planning horizons. Long-term planning. This is a planning horizon of typically several years. And we often call this level also strategic planning. And the important thing is that on the strategic level, we can change the capacities, the structures of our supply chain. So we can involve more partners in our supply chain. We can open or close different factories. These are things that can happen on the strategic long-term level. We have a mid-range level. Here it's written that the midterm planning is over roughly half a year to 2 years. And in this level, we try to find out how to align our operations to the strategic decisions. Usually here, we do not assume that the main capacities, like the factories, the number of factories, that they can change on this level. However, what we try to integrate here is a seasonal change in demands. So, for example, in the winter period, the demand for fashion products is a different one than in the summer period. This can happen on the monthly basis or weekly basis. The demand for food might be different during Ramadan and outside Ramadan. The type of food and the amount of food. And finally, we have the short-term planning. These are all activities that are executed immediately. And on the short-term planning level, we take care of most of the details. This is the highest level of details that we consider in planning. And we want to be very precise. Typically, we call the midterm and short-term planning operational planning, and the long-term planning strategic planning. Sometimes you also find the word tactical planning for midterm planning, but often it's a little bit difficult to differentiate between operational and tactical and strategic. Therefore, here I just use the word operational planning for short-term and midterm planning, and strategic planning for long-term. Now, these planning ideas, of course, they apply to every planning situation inside and outside of business. What is now challenging when we look at supply chains? A very simple and naive approach could be to just identify the alternatives and compare the alternatives with respect to some given criteria, and we select the best one. Often in a supply chain or a supply network, this does not work very well. In most logistics situations, we have several criteria to consider. Just recall what we did in logistics management. We were looking at our level of inventory, and the more inventory we have, the easier it is to fulfill our customer demand at all times. So the more inventory we have, the simpler it is, the better we fulfill our customer demand. The high level of inventory means our customer is happy. However, a high level of inventory also means that we have high inventory holding cost and high cost of capital. So the more inventory we have, the higher our costs. So already in this quite simple situation, we have 2 criteria that we need to trade off against each other. Though usually we have many more criteria to consider when we evaluate alternatives. On top of this,
we typically have a very high number of alternatives that we need to consider. Though from a mathematical point of view, often we have discrete alternatives, and this is very challenging for the methods we know today to evaluate all these discrete alternatives. And one field of research research that is dealing with these huge number of discrete alternatives is called operations research. In semester 3, you will study operations research. This gives you mathematical methods to deal with these huge number of discrete alternatives. Because the number is so high, manually evaluating all these alternatives will become very, very challenging. Practically, it's not possible without the support of sophisticated methods. And the third and last point is that when we plan in a supply chain, or all the planning is directed towards the future, and the longer our plans, the longer we go into the future, usually, or in many cases, the more uncertainty is there. Though we have to deal with uncertainty, that we just don't exactly know what happens. We can have some idea, we can have some models to anticipate this, but basically we don't know what's happened. And these forecasts, they are always, there are always error in these forecasts. They will not be as precise as what really happens. And our methodology, our way of working has to deal with this uncertainty. So these are challenges in planning in business and supply chain environments. Several criteria to decide what is a good solution. We have a huge number of discrete alternatives, and we have to deal with uncertainty of our planning. One way to deal with the uncertainty in planning is more on the midterm planning level, is called rolling horizon planning. So we create a plan, for example, for the next 12 months. We start to implement the plan for the first month of this planning horizon. And after the first month is over, we plan for the next 12 months. And our plan, our new plan, is based on what has actually happened in the first months. So you see it in this picture. Before January, we come up with a plan for the next year. So we plan what's going to happen, what we expect to happen in January, February, March, April, November, December. And the planning horizon is 12 months. We plan 12 periods. Now, what we don't do, we don't start implementing our plan and implementing the plan for February, March, and so on and so on and so on until we are at the end of this year, and 1 year later we look at what happened. No, we don't do this. We only start implementing the first period, the activities that we planned for January, and at the end of January we look what has actually happened in January. Are we as quick as we expected? Are we quicker than expected? Has the market changed? And we come up with a new 12 months plan from February to January to update our plan. And this is called rolling horizon planning. This is a good planning method that you can apply in many situations. Again, when you prepare for your final exams, you have planned the next 20 days. Maybe you come up with a plan which subject you want to study on which day, and you start implementing your plan, and after day 1 you realize you're much faster, so let's change the plan and change what you plan to study on each day. then you apply a rolling horizon planning approach. Now, the title of this slide set is called Advanced Planning in Supply Chains. Now, this term advanced planning, this is a term coming from the supply chain context. Now, what is special about advanced planning? What is special about this approach of advanced planning? It comes from the recognition that we should come up with a plan for the entire supply chain, yeah? From our suppliers to our customers, yeah? Or for our suppliers to our customers. Yeah? The whole network should be planned. Should be, I'm not saying it can be planned or it is planned, but it should be considered, yeah? So that we can align all the plans. And on the other hand, we want to use true optimization methods. That means we have a way of properly defining all our decision alternatives. We have actual criteria how to rate our objectives, how to measure our objectives. Yeah, they are explicit. And we try to know our constraints for all the planning problems, and we use optimization software that will be introduced in courses like modeling language, operations research, advanced operations research here in geotech. So this is software-based optimization approach with exactly defined objective functions. And now the problem is bringing these two together, making all the plans short-term, mid-term, long-term for all the suppliers at the same time. At the moment, we are simply not able to solve this type of problem in a mathematical precise way. It's simply not possible. Practically speaking, we also often don't have the necessary data. We don't have the clarity about the objectives, at least not about all of them. And we are not able to really solve this problem, even if we use the most sophisticated software that is available in the market. And therefore, advanced planning systems use a hierarchical planning system. So we have a hierarchy of certain planning tasks, and we try to plan from the highest level, and based on the result of the highest level, we go one level lower, and based on these results, we go one more level lower. And these lower levels then prepare their plans. If something goes wrong or looks inefficient, the lower levels may inform the higher levels about the success of the plans. And at the moment, this is the only framework that more or less allows us to come up, to implement these ideas, integral planning and true optimization in practice. So advanced planning systems are characterized by integral planning of the different activities. We have true optimization based on optimization software, and a hierarchical planning process is used. Now we will spend some time on discussing this graphic and this graphic. This is a hierarchy of the different planning tasks in the supply chain. On the highest level, I have the long-term planning tasks. These are highly aggregated. They are based on aggregated data. So for example, as a car manufacturer, I plan on this level the number of cars in a certain range that I want to sell. I don't look at the specific brand of the car, the specific type of the car, or make or model of the car. These things will be discussed more lower levels. we have some midterm planning, and we have some short-term planning. Have a look at these arrows. Yeah. We have these arrows, they signal some exchange of information, though there's some exchange of information from the long-term level to the midterm level, and in the opposite direction, from the midterm to the short-term level. And we also have on the horizontal level some exchange of information between these different modules. In this exchange of information, this helps us to coordinate the plans. Now, what actual planning tasks are there along the supply chain? We can look at this picture. This picture is also explained in high detail in the recommended textbook by Fleischmann. This was chapter number 4 of this textbook that I recommended. And the figure is 4.3 and the text that refers to this figure. Now, we have on the one hand, on the left side, the planning horizon, long, mid, and short term. And on the top, you see that we distinguish the planning activities according to processes, that are present in every supply chain. So we have tasks related to procurement, related to production, distribution, and sales. And here these modules, for example, master production scheduling, capacity planning, you see that this module is related to production decisions on the midterm range. Or warehouse replenishment and transportation planning is a short-term decision that needs to be made, which is related to the distribution activities of the supply chain. Now, I recommend having a look at this picture when we go through the following slides. Though the sub-processes, supply chain processes, procurement, production, distribution, sales, these are the 4 here on top. They are part in every supply chain network, and every company of a supply chain network has to deal with these 4 processes. Procurement is about providing the required resources, the required materials or personal workforce. Production is, of course, how we manufacture our products, what and how many, and we use the resources provided by the procurement. Distribution is about how can we overcome the distance, the physical distance between our factory and our customer. And sales is about how to estimate what products we will sell in the future. And depending on our estimate for the future, on what we will sell and how much, all the other 3 processes are driven. Depending on how much we will sell, we need to set up our distribution and our production system and our procurement system. Now let's have a look at some of the long-term planning tasks. And just to give you a heads up how this slide is structured, we have here 5 long-term planning tasks. The first one is product, program, and strategic sales. And this is here in the matrix under the sales category in the long-term planning task. So first of all, why do I have here a single box that is spanning over all the 4 processes? The idea in drawing it this way is that you always keep in mind that the strategic decisions have to look at all the individual processes at the same time. So the strategic decisions should keep in mind all the 4 processes at the same time. And here under sales, we have product program and strategic sales planning. This is now here the first point. And here we decide what is the product range we will offer for the car manufacturer. So for example, should we offer mid-range cars? Should we offer SUV, four-wheel drive cars? Should we offer electric vehicles? It's not about the individual specific vehicle and the features of this vehicle, it's about the big product ranges. We will here discuss dependencies between the different product lines, and we will discuss something like sales regions. Sales regions could be, maybe now we are only selling our products in Oman. So if we add a new sales region, it might be that we sell now our products to the Asian market or other GCC countries or to the United States when it comes to these sales regions. The product life cycle will be discussed and influence the decision making. How long is our product in use? Will there be updates? What happens during the product life cycle? And we will consider the economic and political environment. So now with the war in Ukraine, for example, the long-term plan needs to be updated because maybe the Ukrainian market is no longer available. Maybe I cannot buy raw materials like grain from the Ukraine. And all these things are based on long-term forecasts. We have to think about the physical distribution structure. Again, now we're discussing the second point from the right under distribution and long-term. This includes the number and location of the warehouses, the cross-docking points, and how we transport goods between the warehouses. Do we use railroad? Do we use trucks? Are we using our own trucks or do we outsource these things? Plant location and production system. Are we producing near our sales market? Are we producing offshore, maybe to save labor cost? What are our production capacities? How much are we able to produce? Are our capacities aligned with what we expect to sell? If we expect a big increase in the sales, can we keep track with our production capacity? This needs to be decided in step number 3. And step number 4 discusses the material program and supplier selection. So based on what we want to produce, we have to think about what are the different parts, what are the raw materials that we need to purchase or produce ourselves in order to produce the product program. How much do we need of this? And usually the tool ABC analysis that you know from the logistics management course comes in very handy. So usually for the A products, the most important products, we come up with very different plans, or let's say we only discuss the A products on the strategic decision. The B and C products are usually not discussed on great level of detail. And finally, we discuss cooperations. What is the nature of our cooperations with other companies, with our suppliers, with our customers? What type of contracts arrange these cooperations? What logistics concepts are we using? For example, VMI stands for Vendor Managed Inventory. That means we allow our supplier to manage our level of inventory. Simultaneous engineering, we discussed this in product design. We construct a product, we design a product together with our suppliers because they may know more about the different parts and the different requirements. So we develop products together. These are discussed under cooperations. Now let's move from the long-term planning to the midterm planning tasks. The midterm sales planning is usually done for a couple of months, maybe 1 to 2 years. Here I wrote on the slides for the next 12 months, and we have some forecast for every month of the next 12 months. The forecast is not for individual products, but for groups of products and sales regions. So for example, we try to forecast how many SUVs will we sell in the Middle East sales region, how many electric vehicle will we sell in the North American region. And the groups are based on similar production characteristics. For example, electric vehicle versus vehicles with a petrol engine. Because the way we produce these products will be different. And these sales volume are used as an input for MPS. MPS stands for Master Production Scheduling. We will go for the distribution planning. Now again, I show you where you find this in the matrix. We are on the midterm planning level, distribution. We are discussing now this module, distribution planning. In the distribution planning task, the company decides what is the proper level of inventory and how could we organize the transport between the warehouses or from the warehouse to the customer or from the factory to the warehouse. We consider our available transport strategy and the size of our warehouses. In the master production scheduling, MPS, we try to plan how to use the available capacity in our factories so that we can produce all the forecasted sales in a cost-efficient manner. Now we do this by coming up with weekly or monthly production plans of the product groups. We don't plan individual groups. On this level, we already start to integrate seasonal fluctuations. For example, during the summer months, maybe many people are on holiday. It's a slow period. So on the one hand, our workforce will not be available, but maybe also our customers are not so interested in buying stuff. And then we consider a lower production output during the summer months. We also have to take into account our workforce planning or personal planning. What qualifications do we need? How many staff do we need? How long are they working? Though this is a very important planning task. And finally, on the midterm level, we have the MRP, Material Requirements Planning. In the MPS, we decide how many items of a product group we plan to produce. And on the material requirements planning level, we then look at what are the raw materials, what are the parts that we need to produce the MPS items. And we look at the bill of materials and we consider the dependencies between different production lots so that we can decide what are the required materials. And this also includes making or discussing the contracts for the suppliers that supply our A materials. Again, A materials are from the ABC analysis. You see this simple concept of ABC analysis that we introduced in logistics management pops up as an important tool to make planning easier on all kinds of levels in the supply chain and in real life. So now let's move on from the midterm planning task to the short-term planning task. A couple of weeks or maybe even day-to-day planning. The short-term sales planning, we decide or we distinguish between products that we can fulfill from our stock, from our inventory. And typically we decide between stock that is committed to a customer and stock that is still available. So maybe we have 100 items in our warehouse. We sold 20 of these 100 items to customers, but they are still in our warehouse because we did not yet process the order. Then these 20 items are committed and our sales guys can easily can offer the remaining 80 items to new customers. And these 80 items are called available to promise. We can promise them to other customers. We discuss about how to replenish the warehouse, what strategies to use to replenish the warehouse, and we do some day-to-day transport planning. When we do the transport planning, we consider what are the available transport capacity, for example, what are the available drivers and trucks. Do we need to hire more? Or no, we don't discuss the decision of hiring or buying more trucks because this would change our capacity. On the short-term level, we have to deal with what is available. And we try to come up with transportation plans to fulfill our actual customer orders. On the production floor, on our production, we decide about the lot sizes. So how many items of one lot or of one product should we produce on one machine? Lot sizing, you also know this from the logistics management course when we discussed the economic order quantity, where we decided how many items to order to replenish our warehouse. So this was one lot sizing strategy. And we also decide on this level in what sequence we should produce products on our machines. Because depending on our delivery deadlines with our customers, we need to have some products ready more earlier than other products. And to come up with a plan to fulfill our deadlines, we have to decide about which machine to use when on which product. So the sequencing of the production decision is also important. The same goes for making sure that we have enough staff on the shop floor, that our workforce is big enough, that we have the right workforce, so with the right skills, the right knowledge, the right capabilities. And we also take into account that we plan for overtimes, and we take into account the labor contracts of our staff. Now we discussed every individual module in this matrix. And the coordination between these different tasks is mainly done by exchanging information. Exchanging information on the horizontal level between the planning tasks, the long-term range, the mid-term range, or the short-term range. And it's also done on the vertical level, so that from the sales point of view, for example, depending on what product program we plan and how much we plan to sell, we come up with some midterm plans, and the midterm plans are more specified in the short-term planning. So now we have the coordination and integration activities through the information flows, which are shown in this picture by the arrows in both directions. Make also sure that you understand that there might be more flow of information than is actually indicated by these arrows. So you can improve the planning quality by exchanging more information, for example, not only between midterm procurement and midterm production modules, but also between midterm procurement and midterm sales modules, or midterm procurement information on long-term sales information. For example, if due to the war in Ukraine, suddenly our suppliers for grain are no longer available,
and the prices for grain increase drastically, then probably we cannot produce all the products based on grain that we wanted to produce, and we cannot meet our long-term sales forecast. Though the more information is exchanged, probably the better can be the production plan. Now we have coordination through horizontal information flows. For example, a flow from our sales department, from our order forecasts to in the direction of the purchasing processes. We call this flow an upstream flow. Why is it called upstream? Think of a river. We have a source and a mouth of a river, and when we swim from the mouth of the river towards the source, we swim upstream. So this is the mouth of the river, and the source is going up in this direction. So we would swim upstream in the supply chain if our customers are the mouth who generate the demand, and we communicate this information from the customers in our sales department, in our distribution department, in our production processes, in our procurement processes. Then we go into the direction of upstream. If we follow this upstream information exchange, then our supply chain is driven by the customer, which may be good, but it does not have to be this way. And in order to facilitate this flow of information, there's something that is called sales and operation planning. This is an information exchange between the sales-oriented guys, for example, from the marketing department, sales department, and the operations-oriented functional departments who take care of producing the products. Though the sales guys can say, okay, we have a big advertisement coming up, or we give discounts on a certain product, so make sure that you produce enough from this product. Or the operations-oriented guys could say, oh, look, we have difficulties in producing some products because we don't have enough qualified workforce. We have difficulties in purchasing the materials. Don't make any sales promotion for this type of product. Go for something else. Yeah? So the sales and operations planning is a meeting that should facilitate horizontal flows of information and coordinate the supply chain activities. And of course, we also have a vertical flow of information, mainly from the top to the bottom, though the higher levels inform the lower levels what to do. And by this, the plans are coordinated. And the coordination happens through assigning capacities and setting deadlines. For example, at geotech, I am a resource, I am a teaching resource, I am professor at geotech, and I can teach students. So I know that for the course production logistics and transportation management, I have on average 4 hours per week to teach you this material. Yeah? So I should not spend more hours and I should not spend less hours. Yeah? So this is the time available that I can discuss with you. Yeah? So this is setting a priority for certain things that I, as a person, as a professor, should do, and it's setting a priority and capacity on the type of things I should teach. On the other hand, coordination can happen by setting deadlines. This needs to be done until the end of day. This needs to be done until the end of next week. I can, by setting deadlines, emphasize what I want you to do. And by this, the plans get coordinated.
Of course, there's also some information flow from the lower level to the upper level. And this can be very helpful to inform the upper level about potential problems, potential bottlenecks that have been overlooked, about more realistic things that happen. And the upper level then should come up with a new updated plan. Okay, now these were our planning tasks in the supply chain, how to classify them, what the tasks are all about, and how they are coordinated through the flow of information. Though this is a quite important matrix to know about. In order to learn more about this matrix, how it's applied, you can have a look at section 4.3.1 in the recommended textbook. And this is a case study about a consumer goods company. And you see what they are doing with respect to some of the planning tasks in the supply chain. What are they actually doing there? And this case study will help you get a better understanding of the supply chain planning matrix. This will help you to make the abstract concepts more concrete. Okay, let's close today's session on advanced planning in supply chains. We discussed the nature of planning. You can explain the characteristics of planning, which include mainly identifying the alternatives and selecting the best ones, different phases of planning, different planning horizons, etc. We discussed some challenges in supply chain, which makes planning in supply chains very challenging. And based on these challenges, I introduced you to the main characteristics of the advanced planning approach. We discussed the so-called supply chain planning matrix, this matrix that has planning horizons, long, mid, and short term, and the different processes, procurement, production, distribution, and sales. And it helps you to classify, to structure different planning tasks. And of course, you should have an idea about what is the nature of these planning tasks. And also, let me give you a heads up, some of these planning tasks are discussed in extra courses here in Geotech that you will take in the future. So you see, this gives you an overall picture of what management and planning tasks are done in a supply chain. I wish you a good day. Thanks for joining today, and see you around next week.